Hi, this is Lorraine, and I'm doing another video. If you'll give me just a minute to clear center and balance my energy, and we will get started. So, just two things have come to me this week. As far as messages, but messages regarding, I guess, connected to last week's video. And then some other personal stuff has come through that I feel like I'm being asked to talk about, but I don't really want to talk about. So I'm just going to sit and start and just kind of allow the flow of energy to happen and just kind of go from there. Because if I think too much and impose myself too much on what I'm saying, it affects the flow of information and it becomes disjointed and it becomes ineffective. I feel messages become ineffective as I'm reviewing the video. So the first thing I'm going to say is, in the last video I talked about how the raptors have this readied position like a sprinter, and how their tails are kind of whipping back and forth like a cat, a predator ready to pounce. And this whole last week, there was a rattle attached to their tail. So they were whipping the tail back and forth and then kind of rattling it like a rattlesnake. And I thought to myself, that's interesting. So I looked up what the rattle on a rattlesnake signifies. I kind of had an idea, but I wanted to make sure. I don't like to assume anything. And so basically the rattle is like a warning. And it lets you know that the rattlesnake is about ready to attack or bite. But also, a rattlesnake doesn't always necessarily rattle their tail before they bite. So those are two very important components. So the first thing that it tells me is this is a message to let me know that who's ever in place is ready to strike for freedom of humanity. The other thing is they're not going to make a big hoo-ha about it. So we're not going to see it. We're not going to see what's happening. It's just going to happen. And that's probably the best course of action. Intuitively, that's how I feel. So that's the first thing. The other thing was, actually the first thing, that was the second thing that came through this last week. The first thing was that the head of the snake has been cut off. So the head of the snake has been cut off, and what we are witnessing is its flailing body as it dies. So there's that. Those are the two main messages that came through this past week. Another thing I will mention is I talked about the ringing in my ears. That's part of the raising of vibration. So if you have that happening to you, also it could quite possibly be your raising of vibration. There are other things that can cause that, but I'm just going to say I know for me personally it is a raising of vibration, and it is for me constant. And what I noticed in this past week, as I'm engaging people, as I engage people in a more positive light, in a more uplifting light, in a way to support them, as a fellow human being, encouraging words or friendship, or at work supporting someone to be better at their job or be better at school or be better at their studies, however that is, that ringing goes straight up, super high pitched, like so high. I guess you would say a good way to a metaphor would be if you've heard of people who have had near-death experiences and they talk about going to the light and how the light is so bright but it doesn't hurt their eyes. This pitch is so high that you would think it would be piercing my eardrums, but it's not. It's just very subtle and comforting, but it's really, really high, like dog whistle high. And I thought that was interesting. Maybe it's been happening, but this is the whole time, but this is the first time I've taken note of it. So this past week, that's happened quite a bit where that pitch just went straight through the roof. Also, I've noticed that the pitch can get very high and very loud, and I can't hear anything around me. So last week, I said it doesn't affect my hearing. But recently I've noticed that there are times when that pitch gets so high and so, I want to say, what I see when I think about that is this really wide wave or frequency that's happening, just really broad sweeping waves of frequency, that it's so high and so broad, it's just shutting everything out around me. So I'm not detached from the world, but I can't hear anything around me. And so what I'm feeling is there is it's separating me from this reality. Even though I can open my eyes and I can see my room, wherever I am, my living room, my bedroom, whatever. I can see that I'm physically present in this space, in this wave-based reality that really is a hologram. I am being removed energetically through sound frequency. So I haven't sat and meditated and asked, okay, what's going on as far as that is concerned. What my feeling is as I say that is that I'm being moved to different places to do different parts of my job, my purpose on this world, in this life, that doesn't require me to be on this plane and in this space, physical space. So my higher self, my energetic self, is projected somewhere else to do my light working there. Let's see, what else? The other thing, which right after I did the last video, the next day, I woke up and I could hear the horn of God bellowing for, I would say, 20 minutes. And I just, what can you do when these things happen? I just sat there and thought to myself, that's interesting. And so all this event, that event, would be, to me, signifying the beginning of something, a change in something. And in the video, or in the write-up that I did, the description for the video I did last week, I created a metaphor for roller coasters and going up the first hill and right before the drop. Okay, so we are right there at that cusp, right before the drop. And so that horn, if I think about that, could represent that first drop. And so I knew it was going to happen. Last week when I did the video, I also felt, okay, I'm moving out of this really rough last 2 months energetically, and I am going to, now everything's going to open up again. I've got this whole telepathic thing, under control, and I can handle this flow of energy, this movement, back and forth. I'm good. It's going to get better. And then last week, I had just a really rough week. And previously, before I started working this job, I just did readings, and I was home with my kids. I was just working with my kids. So I just did readings to supplement my income. And I was moved into working into a job, a regular job, which I enjoy. But what I realized was the job, I had to do this job so I can grow spiritually. My gifts could be increased, and I would have to learn how to have this higher vibration and engage the world. Because it was very easy to be at home, do readings from home, constantly be clearing and centering and balancing my energy, and only engaging people when I chose to, physically. And that was very simple. So if I was having a really emotional day, or my emotions were running high, it was easy for me to just be at home and meditate and just clear, center, and balance my energy in that moment and not have to engage. But I was moved into working. I felt very strongly I needed to go out into the world and work. And what I realized was in these last couple months is that I have to learn to live in this world with my gifts being amplified. I have to be able to be around people all the time. I have to engage this world. I can't go into my room and meditate whenever I feel like I need to move myself back into balance. I have to learn how to maintain balance as I engage this world every day. Each individual, each group, whatever it is. And it's been very difficult. And so this last week, again, I was moved in and out of center. And I'm very passionate about things. I have a very clear idea of what's right and wrong, and I have very clear boundaries that I do not cross. I do no harm. I work really hard to do no harm, even though I do make mistakes, and I always try to right those wrongs. But when I have a really big issue with bullies. I have a really big issue with people taking advantage of other people. I've never done that, but I've had people bully me, and I've had people try to take advantage of me, and I've always stood my ground. And sometimes I've been in very vulnerable positions, and I've always been able to make my way out of it alive and intact, although I do have a lot of traumas that I've suffered in my lifetime from childhood up. But because of those traumas, I'm very, very protective of people who I see being victimized or bullied, taken advantage of, manipulated. And so when I witness these things, I become very hypervigilant. And being telepathic now and seeing it, not only seeing it, but now I know it. Now I can see how manipulative people are, and how people come across as being nice and caring and supportive, and all the while they're trying to manipulate you into doing what they want you to do. I see that very clearly. And so as I walk through this world and I witness it, I become very upset, very angry, very bitter, very resentful, and I become hypervigilant. I become very protective of people who I care about, especially people who I know, who I'm close to. When I witness that, sometimes I witness things that are outside of my scope that I can affect. But people that are within my scope that I know and I'm seeing it in front of me, I become incredibly hypervigilant, incredibly protective, and I have to really rein myself in, because I can become very verbal, and at this point I can articulate myself in a way that is effective, very focused, and hard to argue against, because of the knowing. But sometimes it's just not appropriate for me to get involved, because we're dealing with adults. I'm dealing with adults, not children. But some people have traumas that they're still living in, and it makes it difficult for them to advocate for themselves. And because I've dealt with my traumas, they can't be used against me to manipulate me. And so I always want to jump in. I always want to try to protect that person who's still in a state of vulnerability, to try to help them. But sometimes it's not appropriate. The best thing they can do is face their traumas. And so this last week, I was witnessing some stuff that made me very angry and started moving me in and out of center, and people were witnessing me become that very protective person, but they didn't, because I was responding to telepathic information, they didn't understand why I was becoming so verbal. And I wasn't yelling at people, but I become very strong, clear, directed in my communications, and I guess a little bit curt, and then and it's something that most people don't see or haven't seen in me in my place of employment up until recently. And so it was a very difficult week, and so I ended up like channeling this paragraph right here, and as a result, I don't know if I want to say as a result of last week, but I think it is to help bring perspective. How do I ask you to face your greatest pain head on? How do I ask you to see, feel, and reconcile your most traumatic moments? If or when you are able to do this, you become unstoppable. You are the gift of this world. You become what you need to be. You transmute darkness into light. You are the alchemist. Can you do that? Can you do that for me? And it's hard to ask people, to explain to people. And having been through a lot of traumatic experiences in my childhood, which I do have talked directly with people that I do readings for, and I used to do work at the local day centers where homeless people come during the day to shower and eat. I used to do readings and guest services where I just help people with trying to find jobs and resumes and find services. I talk openly about my traumas because people need to understand that they're not alone and that they're not the only ones who've suffered, and that there is a way out of the darkness, this helplessness, this vulnerability that you feel, the fear. And what I've learned in my life, in all the stuff I've been through and all the help and therapy I've gotten, and then also all the meditating and connecting to the higher self and the divine source and angels and guides to try to help me find perspective so I can move forward. One thing I've learned is you cannot run away from your traumas. You cannot bury them. You cannot bury them in drugs, alcohol, sex, eating, running. Whether it's a negative or positive vice, you can't bury it in those things. You have to face it head on. You have to feel all the emotions of anger, sadness, bitterness, betrayal, vulnerability, vengeance, all the things that we go through when we think about what happened, why it happened, how could that happen, how could anybody let that happen, all those things, why did I do that, the feeling of failure, the feeling of letting people down, all those things, we have to feel those emotions, let ourselves break from those experiences. And then from those broken pieces, we pull ourselves back together. We let that go. We let those experiences go and forgive ourselves, forgive everyone around us for what has happened, or the people that we blame or that we're angry with. And then we don't allow those things to define us. Don't allow the traumas to define us. Don't allow our mistakes to define us. And then we pull ourselves back together, and then we step forward on a new path to be better than we were in the past, to use those experiences to teach us, not to hinder us, not to stop us, not to instill fear in us. And we use those experiences to have compassion for other people, empathy for other people who are still dealing with their traumas and their past experiences, their regrets, their sadnesses that they have, that they're holding on to. That is what I've learned. That's what I know. And once you can do that, there's nothing anybody could do to stop you. There's nothing anybody could do to touch you, because you have dealt with your most broken parts. You've allowed those broken parts to be broken, and now you just bring them back together. You bring yourself back together. You rebuild yourself, and you make yourself into the person you want to be. You don't allow the past to define you. When you're stuck in the past, when you're stuck in these experiences, those things make you who you are, and you don't feel like you have value to have anything good in your life. Once you let that go and not define yourself by that past and by your mistakes or by the traumas of your life that you feel make you less than, once you're able to do that, you see how beautiful you are, what you have to offer, because you have compassion in your heart for those who are suffering, and you share kindness and love and understanding and tolerance for those who are suffering, and that's all comes from goodness. And when you bring that goodness out into the world, you see that you have value, and people appreciate that goodness, and then they reciprocate. So when you put that goodness out that you want to see into the world, that's when you get it back. That's the law of attraction happening. But it's hard to put that goodness out and receive it back if you're stuck in the past and you're defining yourself by the negative traumatic experiences, your own mistakes, your own wrongs. Don't do that. We have to find a way out of that. And part of that is you can't shut it out. You can't not see it. You can't pretend it's not there. You have to allow those feelings to come through and feel those emotions and then let it go. It's very hard. I spent years doing that, a lot of tears, a lot of meditating, a lot of sadness, but I still have sadness about it, but I'm in a different place. I'm completely fortified by those things that I thought would break me, that I thought were breaking me. But I realize that those things are my greatest strength. Those traumas are my greatest strengths. I know if those things didn't take me out, that nothing will. So when I talk about that, because there's a person that I know that I see where I work who is being taken advantage of. And it's that person who I have an incredible amount of love and compassion for, that I want to try to help, but it's inappropriate for me to intervene in their life. So I witness telepathically what he's going through and how he's being taken advantage of. And it makes me very angry. It makes me very bitter. It makes me very resentful that someone would take advantage of someone who's already been through so much in their life. And they've convinced themselves that it's okay. They've convinced themselves that even maybe they're doing him a favor. They're convincing themselves that it's quid pro quo. Both of them are getting something out of it, so everything's okay. And that's not true. Because even though they've convinced themselves of that, this person is still being traumatized over and over. And this person, this gentleman, I don't even think he realizes it, because he's so shut off from his emotions that he's unaware of how these interactions are affecting him emotionally because he's completely shut himself off. So as I witness these things, it completely throws me out of balance because I have this incredible compassion for people who have been through similar traumatic experiences as I have, and I get very upset about bullying. I get very upset about people being taken advantage of, and it just moves me out of center. And that's just one person. That's just one person that I saw. When you have hundreds of people walking by you every day, and you're getting that information from them, positive and negative, their traumas, that they're being taken advantage of, or they're suffering somehow. I'm getting all that information, not as much as this one person, but always getting information coming in, and that is moving me in and out of balance, and it's a constant struggle. But I've been asked to be in this place. I've been asked to be in groups of people like this because I have to learn how to have this ability and still exist in this world as a human being living right now in Seattle with people around me. I can't stay holed up in my home. I can't do that, or in a cave somewhere. I can't do that. I have to engage people. So this has been a very difficult week, another very difficult week. And I'm being asked to make this video, which I didn't want to do because I'm worried about what they're going to ask me to talk about. But I always do what I'm asked. So the other thing is, when I move in and out and I'm struggling with keeping my center, I feel like a failure. I feel like I'm failing in my soul purpose. And part of my soul purpose is maintaining center, clearing, centering, and balancing not only myself and these people around me that I talked about in the last video, but also Mother Earth, also this world, focusing on clearing the energy on this planet and maintaining center, connecting with the beings in the center of the earth that represent fire, water, air, earth, and heart, and unifying with them and bringing the human component, this perspective I carry, to this heart center of Mother Earth, and helping to maintain balance and move us into balance, move us into the light, because we're so far in darkness. We were so far in darkness. We needed to move into the positive polarity, even though the ultimate goal is balance. I feel like I fail every time I move out, every time I get angry and frustrated with people being disrespectful, being entitled, being inconsiderate, not looking out for the person next to them, just thinking about themselves. I become angry and I move out of center, and I feel like I'm failing in my soul purpose. And so that is the worst place I can go. The best thing I could do is say, it's okay, forgive myself, and just focus on moving back into center. That's the best thing I could do, but I get stuck in this anger because I care so much about people, and there's certain people in this world that I see suffering personally, that I know one-on-one, and I want to help them to not suffer, because I know what they need to not suffer, to get through it, but I can't force them on that path. So I become sad and I become frustrated, and this all comes from engaging people and knowing their emotions, knowing their thoughts, knowing their struggles without them speaking to me. And I have to carry it. I have to carry the knowing, and it's very difficult. And when I start moving energetically like that, I just feel like a failure. So that's part of my struggle that I've been going through for the last 2 months, is that feeling of I have a profound soul purpose on this world and I'm failing at it. So I just always just keep pulling myself up by my bootstraps, and I just keep on moving forward, and I ask for forgiveness, and I ask for strength, and I ask for support and helping me maintain my center. And they always come through. When I was clearing my energy in the beginning, I had all these ones around me. So one represent, balanced thought. Your thoughts create your reality, so keep your thoughts positive. So you manifest those positive things. The raptors came around me. Normally when I reach out to them, they're like, we're not BFFs, right? So they came around me because I was struggling. I've been struggling. And they said, we are supporting you. We are here. Everything's going to be okay. I had this military individual that I've seen, not at work, but outside, who came in and said, you're doing okay, his higher self, because he's alive. And I'm not sure if we've never met, so I know he's not, if he's communicating with me telepathically or remote viewing, then I guess that's a possibility. But I'll just say that his higher self is coming in and saying, you're doing a good job, you're okay. It's okay if you move out of center every now and then. And then I had a bunch of other galactic energies come in and start telling me the same thing, to let me know that you're doing well. It's just a hard place that we're in right now. So they're affirming that I'm doing my job, and I'm doing a good job at it, at what I'm producing, even though I feel at times that I'm a failure. So what I have to take from that is stop punishing myself and focus on the positive. Don't focus on your transgressions, but focus on maintaining your positive centered energy as much as possible, and in those moments focus on the reality that you want to create. The other thing that keeps on coming to me is my Uncle Dan. So the last video I talked about my Uncle Dan, and he said, they didn't put me down, so they won't put you down. And so these people in my life, my grandma, my grandpa, my great Uncle Dan, my dad, they kind of represent parallels of who I'm, part of who I am. And Uncle Dan represents the warring, of fighting, the training, the commitment, the steadfastness, the Puerto Rican side of me, I guess. And last video I talked about him talking to me about his experiences in World War II, because I just asked him if my grandmother was always the person she was. She was beautiful, kind person, healer. I felt like she was born in a state of grace, and he said to me, yes, she's always been that way. And from birth, because Grandpa and Grandma raised Uncle Dan, because Grandpa and Uncle Dan's parents passed away when he was young. There's a big age difference between Grandpa and Uncle Dan. So when I asked him that question about Grandma, he started talking to me about some of his experiences, because Grandma prayed for him when he was in World War II, and he was there in Europe for a really long time. And one of the stories he told me was how right before he came home, and he said, he didn't tell me the whole story. He told me parts of it. He told me that they thought he was dead. He was in Italy. They came to Grandma and Grandpa, told them that he was dead, Grandma went to church and prayed for 2 days, and then 2 days later they came back and said they found him in a hospital in Italy. And he said that he was paralyzed from the chest down. And it took him 8 or 9 months to get from Italy back to Kohala on the big island of Hawaii. And by the time that he got back to Kohala, he was walking again. That he said Grandma prayed for him, and that was why, she healed him. And what I found out later from my uncle, Larry, my dad's younger brother, was that not only Uncle Dan told me this, his whole, I don't know if it was a platoon or a squad, they all died. He said only he and his CO had survived. Uncle Larry told me that he saved his CO. The only reason why his CO was still alive is because he saved his life. He also told me that they had put Uncle Dan, they thought he was dead, they put him in a body bag. And that somebody saw movement in the body bag, and they took him out, and they took him to the hospital, and he survived. And so my uncle came, and when he says they tried to stop me, they didn't stop me, and they won't stop you, that has a very profound meaning for me, because I've dealt with all my traumas, and I always say I'm unstoppable, and I am. And so he said to me today, he told me to say, tell them if they ever see you in a body bag to make sure they look for signs of life, because you're unstoppable. They won't stop you. And so today was a really rough day. And so I just needed to affirm my commitment to my purpose in this life. That no matter what, I won't stop. I've spent so many lifetimes fighting wars. I've run wars. I've been generals. I've been soldiers. But this war, this fight, isn't my fight. I'm the spiritual arm of this transition. I'm not gonna be boots on the ground. And so I will be steadfast in maintaining my center. I will work diligently, and I will work harder to maintain my center, because I'm struggling so much, and like I said, sometimes I feel like I'm a failure, but I'll work harder. And I'll be better. And I won't stop. I will make sure that we move back into center. And I will support all those people who are walking that line between light and darkness, and who are making the hardest decisions, and who are having to face that darkness head on, face to face, physical form, not spiritual, physical form. And I will work diligently, daily, to fortify your energy and fortify the source of energy around you to protect you. Keep your light bright, regardless of what you have to do to protect humanity, to save humanity, to free humanity. Because that's the real challenge. What you're doing is the hardest part. It's hard maintaining the center. It's hard, but I think what you're doing is harder. And so I'm reaffirming that commitment. I work diligently to clear, center, and balance your energy daily, 3-4 times a day. I fortify your energy with love and light. I support you with clarity of thought, mind, body, and spirit every day. 3 or 4 times a day, I do that. I do it when I clear my energy. So I just want to affirm that commitment. Straight out. Let me see if anything else comes. I just see the beings on the discs around the earth. And they're just looking at me and smiling like they're on a ride. So I think sometimes when I get really emotional and I'm struggling, they kind of start behaving comically to make me laugh, which is what they're kind of doing. They're kind of acting like they're surfing around the earth. Kind of telling me to lighten up. Everything will be okay. The gentleman in the White House, I think he's in the White House, in the government, the blonde hair, blue-eyed guy I told you was communicating telepathically with these beings on the discs, looked at me and he had his hand over his eye like this, and he said, "I got my eye on the prize." And then his eye got really big. It was just really funny. It was a little cartoonish, trying to lighten me up. The raptors are showing me the children happy because they know I love kids, so they know I'm always concerned with how they're doing. So they want to show me that they're okay. And the beings at the center of the earth also smiling and waving. I guess I got really heavy because everybody's no messages. They're just all coming in to kind of lighten the mood. Sometimes as information comes in, because I'm flowing with the information and I'm not thinking about it, I'm not sure what's coming out. I only really know what's come out when I'm reviewing the video and editing out, some of the meditation sections. The moon's bright, so the moon's been cleaned up energetically, is what I'm seeing. And so I don't want to force it, but what I was taken back to was the head of the snake has been cut off. We're just witnessing the body flailing. When I look at the earth, there's just calm all around, out on all the other planets, and I see eyes watching. Not like people looking at animals in a zoo, but it's kind of like, the end of a football game or something, and you've got, seconds and you need to get a touchdown, or the end of a baseball game and bases are loaded and two strikes and 2 outs, and it's all about this last pitch is going to determine the end of the game. That's what it's like. It's like everybody is watching with bated breath to see what happens next. Now, we know the earth is moving, Mother Earth is moving into balance, so we know what's going to happen. It's been prophesized, but how it happens is specifically the details, the nuances of what happens has not been determined. We know generally what happens. We're going to move back into balance, but how that happens specifically hasn't been determined. So all these energies are watching, waiting to see what happens. So I think that's it. Thank you so much.